The best way to get better at programming is to practice. And in this example, we're going to take a previous example where we calculate the value of the area of a circle. But now, instead of printing it out inside that function, we're going to return that value. As always, this file is available for download using a link in the description below. We'll pause for a couple seconds, let you download it, and then you can follow along. Or you can follow along based upon the previous example that you work with. All right, so let's get started. If you notice here, I have that function that we already created, and it already has that cout statement. Well, we need to take that out. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that one line. And what we want to do is return the area. So I'm going to come up here to my function header where I have my return type. Right now it says void. We don't return anything. Now we're going to want to return something. So we have to give it the data type. We don't know what the variable is. We don't know what the value is. We just know the data type. And this is going to be double. With that, on line 29, since we're specifying that, hey, we're returning a value, we need to return a value. Specifically, we're going to return area. So I'm going to say return, and then I can use a variable such as area. I could also return a literal value if that's needed, but most of the time, it's going to be a value that was calculated inside of a variable. Now, if you notice up on line 19, we're showing an error. That's because our function prototype is different from our function definition. Therefore, we need to remove the void and replace that with double as well. Now we have a default value, we have a return type, and everything is good. So inside my main, I'm going to put a cout. The area of a circle is, and I'll say area of circle. I could put a couple other things, so I'm just going to copy and paste here. If I run this, you notice it gives me those different values, so you can kind of see what's going on. Now, if we scroll up and see the go further, it says we can take an input from a user, and we could obviously do that. And then what happens if they give us an invalid input, a negative radius, for example? So let's just see this real quick. I'm going to create a new variable, double radius. I'll say cout what is the radius of the circle, cn radius, and I'll say area of circle, and I'm going to pass in that parameter. So this part makes sense so far. And I can say 5, it gives me a value. Okay, so that part's good so far, but what happens if we get a negative value for our radius? Well, something kind of funny happens because we're squaring this. And if I put in -5, you might remember, hey, this is the exact same value. That's because a negative times a negative is a positive. Well, that's not completely accurate because, well, first off, we shouldn't have a negative radius. So what I want to do is come in here, and before I calculate my area, I'm going to say if radius is less than or equal to 0, return area of circle. And notice what I'm doing is I'm calling this function again. But now, because I don't pass a parameter, it's going to give me my default value. Then I can say else. And if it has a radius that's bigger than 0, then it's going to return that value. So now if I come here and run this, I can say -5, and notice it returns the area of the circle is 3.14159. Okay, so what happened? Well, it said, ooh, negative value. That can't be. Go and call the default value. Okay, so call that function the default parameter. So what happened? Well, radius was -5, so therefore it was less than 0. That means it went out and did what we call a recursive function call. That is, the function called itself, but this time, instead of passing in that negative parameter, it passed in no parameter, so the default value was used. It's a quick and easy little fix. Now, should it throw an error or should it do something like that? That depends upon your application and what you're doing. So it's kind of an interesting problem to look at. There's a couple ways to solve it or go about handling it. That's just one way. If you liked this video and found it useful, please give this video a like and consider looking at the other videos in this series to learn how to get better at programming C and C++.